Welcome to Uncommon Ground. Speaking over shouting, this is Jason Moline,
Elijah Wharton.
And I am Andrew Durand.
and today our topic is public high school. And I'll be starting us off with a question. What is the dumbest thing that you have heard of or seen someone get in trouble for at high school or in high school?
I'll start us out. This is a good one. So, dumbest from what perspective? I guess this is better to clarify now. Better from whose perspective, or dumb from whose perspective? The student or the teacher's perspective?
Uh, I guess it would be it
Either
should be
or.
dumb enough where both people have the same
Okay.
perspective and against the administration.
Well, I think in general, a dumb thing for students to get in trouble with or in trouble for is going to the bathroom. Like they can't control their bodily functions. Like if they got to go to the bathroom frequently, that's on them. Um, I will say that that's something that students can sometimes abuse, but like you can't ever know for sure. So it's stupid from getting them in trouble for that, anyways. And I think some schools are backing away from that to begin with, but I think that's the first one that comes to mind. I'll probably think of a better one, but I don't know if Andy has one or
Oh,
if
I
you have
have a
one in mind.
story. I have a story about I went to a little rinky-dink high school in the middle of nowhere. So we actually had a pretty big chew problem. So it was basically everywhere. It'd be on stairwells, inside of like sinks in the bathroom, just
Like big league chew or like dip chew.
dip. It was dip everywhere. So there's one time, senior prank let three chickens loose in the school and named them 1, 2, and 4. Right? You know, your standard chicken prank. So, so the problem was they gave these kids who let the chickens loose in the school. They gave them 5 days of in school suspension. You only get 3 days if you're caught with chew.
Hmm. So wait, so you get 3 days if you get caught with chew, but you got 5 days for letting chickens loose?
Yes,
Uh-huh.
chicken's
Okay.
bad, drugs good.
That's a message for the kids right there.
Exactly. So yeah, that's my fun little story about weird and kind of stupid things to get in trouble for. You should get in trouble for that because that's a pretty chickens are disgusting animals, man. They're
I
gross.
I grew up on a chicken farm.
Yeah,
I know.
so they're
I know.
disgusting.
Yeah. It's
So
not
you
it's
really
not
want to
great.
avoid having people do that kind of thing.
You got to give chickens a little bath to wash themselves off of. Then they're
But
pretty. Then they're
chickens
pretty clean.
aren't illegal. So there's a bit of a difference there.
Jason, what
That's
about you, man? I know we went to the same high school, so but
yeah.
I
I'm
wonder
trying.
if you have
I
anything.
have I have definitely like probably a common one, but um, I think it was definitely witnessing. I guess in the high school itself for me, it was witnessing the complete double standard when it comes to acceptable clothing and how much of just a complete creep some of the administrators were in like def
About dress code, yeah.
yeah.
That's something that I think is important to touch on. I agree that like there can be clothing that can be distracting to students, but I don't think it's up to the teachers to determine if it's distracting or not. I just the whole idea of dress codes is I get the idea behind it because it's supposed to portray a form of professionalism that will carry on into the workforce, but it's dress codes are it's I don't think that adults should be judging teenagers, particularly teenage girls, get hit hardest by this. Uh, they should be, I guess, patrolling their appearance, if that makes sense.
Yeah, if you had if there was a way to have some non-human do it, that would be better. But the idea of like 45-year-old men just making sure meticulously that girls wear certain clothing or don't wear certain clothing is a little creepy. More than a little. Very creepy.
This
But
was not a problem in my high school.
was it really? It
No, not
wasn't.
at all. I was in a graduating class of like 87 kids.
Oh.
Huh.
See, Jason and I graduated in a class of almost 400, and
Yes.
Yeah.
so we there was problems that we've experienced. But I mean, I've met people who've graduated in classes bigger than that. We had a relatively big class, but our school was county-wide. We went to a technical school, so I think that we had a different experience, but I guess that can
I
kind
mean,
of lead me to.
I think just declaring the difference in class sizes that we had a very different experience.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I knew everybody in my grade. I at least knew their name, right?
Oh no,
And so I could recognize anybody in my grade on sight because there was
I
only like 100 of us.
absolutely not. We could never.
We
So
could almost recognize everyone on site that they were in our grade, but knowing names, that's a little
Yeah.
that's a little more tricky.
names is tricky, and I think that's I kind of sad about that because I wonder what it's like to know everyone in your grade. But like at the same time, I'm kind of glad that I didn't know everyone in my grade because I think the good thing about having a large school population is you have a lot of ground to find a
Decent
broad friend
people.
group. Yeah, decent people. You can find a larger number of decent people. But I think that leads me to this question. Do you guys think that class size can lay down do you think class size is a good determinant of whether or not you get a quality education?
Yes, very much so. If you are in a big, dependent on the topic for sure, but if you are in a large class and you're trying to learn stuff like for you, Eli, math.
Well, okay, I guess let me make this distinction. Class size as in school population, not class size as in student teacher ratio.
I think if it's reasonable, like less than 5, 6, maybe less than 1,000, it probably works. But bigger than that, I don't know.
I suspect that it's a factor, but I think that the more relevant factor would be the ratio of students to teachers.
Well,
And
yeah,
I
and
Yeah.
mean
that
teachers. I don't mean
there's
personnel. I mean teachers.
yeah, I mean there's math on that, or there's studies that have been done on that, and I guess that's why I was trying to get a different perspective, like because I know that there is research done that shows that uh, the number of students to teachers should be and I don't know the exact number. It's in the ballpark of like 10 is
Yeah, I
what
was
it should
about to
be.
say 10,
It's
10 to 1 is what I would say the ideal ratio is
yeah.
being in as many classes as I've been in so far. Or
That's
just not
that
being able to talk to the teacher or professor because of the size of the class is really irritating, especially if you're trying to learn something.
oh yeah, and that I like that's just a given because I've been in a class. I think the largest class I've been a part of, not like outside of college, is I had a class of like 32 in like middle school or something. And when you have a class of 32, if you have a question, chances are if other people have a question, they're gonna get picked and not you.
What about gym though? We had gym.
I don't count gym. Gym's
Guys,
different.
it's not gym. It's physical education. Okay.
In middle and elementary school, it's gym.
I don't think it is anymore. I think it's physical education across the board.
PE.
PE. I don't
Huh.
know. I think it might. It's a funny question because I do think that the ratio matters more, but I do also think it probably does factor in. Like the actual size of the school, I think matters because if there's less teachers communicating, then the odds of cohesive instruction across grades probably is better.
Oh, I wasn't even thinking about it from that
That's
perspective.
smart. Yeah, I didn't
That's
think
a
about that.
I thought I was thinking about more like the likelihood that you'll get the same students in multiple classes, so you can get better acquainted with people for working with them in group projects. Because group projects are Well, I guess it depends on what field you go into, but
For you, they're very important.
for me, it is stupid important. It is essential. If you can't operate within a group, no success. Well, there's like two cases.
I think that might have to be where high school failed me, is I suck at working with people. I am an independent worker at heart, and I get I get anxious when people want to work, like when like group work is required. Even now, it's like I'm in a class right now where we have to do assigned work. Like we're assigned like 30 something problems, and we have to decide as a group how we want to go about doing those 30 something problems. But we can just split it evenly, and that was immediately what I recommended to the group. I was like, look, I just want me to pick my handful of problems and do them, and you guys pick your handful of problems and do them. It's
Yeah,
like it just works so much easier for me.
right now I'm dealing with situations where it's groups of 4 or 5 people and there's a singular deliverable, just one thing. And so you are forced to communicate very directly. And with I have 5 classes, and all of them are requiring group work right now, and it's a lot. And my strategy in high school was very much, in most cases, figure out who's not going to work, and then partner with them and just do everything myself.
And that's
That
what I
was
would do too. And I think that's part of the reason why it failed, because even when I did have to do group work, the teacher would pair me with a low performing student. That way I would just basically take the wheel and they would get the grade. Which is sad, because it's sad that I can knowingly say that happened, especially from like the student perspective. Like I was so aware of it, but like it's a sad truth about the education system. But
It's really interesting to hear about all this from a musician perspective, because ultimately, like, high level musicianship, the goal is that you stick everybody in a room, and it doesn't matter whether or not they've met. They can all play this music, and they can all play it accurately in the same style because everybody's done their homework. So it's like you do all that individual prep work, but then you're all so hyper prepared that you walk into a room and you all play it together, and you just do it perfectly. Like that's the goal of music ultimately. Like on a professional level, if you can walk into a room and you can comfortably play whatever they throw at you with a group of people, and you can hear the style and work with the style of music, you did it.
You have a
Congratulations.
composer though, correct?
Well,
In those cases,
somebody has to compose
or
the
a
music.
conductor.
The
I mean,
conductor,
conductor.
the conductor is interesting because once you hit a certain level, the conductor is more or less irrelevant. Like,
he's just like a metronome at a certain point.
not even. Like high level musicians do not need a conductor. Kind of. It's really interesting. So a conductor doesn't technically even need to start off an ensemble because you have a lead. It's usually the first violinist. If the first violinist starts off any professional orchestra on the planet, they will play the whole thing probably perfectly. Music actually gets into this really interesting thing where they have like there's a lot of micro decisions that have to be made so that everybody can agree on things. So like you guys know like a dotted eighth 16th rhythm.
I do.
Yeah.
Jason
Kind of.
might be less familiar, but
So you do, Jason, or you don't?
I might, because I am
Okay,
somewhat familiar, but not with terms.
I'll see if I can explain this very quickly. So 16th notes is a quarter note divided into 4 equal pieces, basically, right? And a dotted eighth 16th figure basically splits it up so that you play one note and you hold 3 of them, and then you play the last 16th note, and then you move on to whatever beat is next, right? So this is an interesting rhythm, and there's some questions about how you play it and how long you play it for. So is this part longer or shorter? How much space do you put between here, and exactly how long do you hold this for? And that's actually what conductors are for. They're for saying, no, I want that shorter, or no, I want this shorter, and I want more space here. Like that's the micro level at which the conductor is supposed to be doing the thinking at high level.
so
Huh.
would you say that the conductor is, in terms of performances, not necessary, but in terms of preparing, completely necessary?
I think that's a fair statement, because basically what happens is musicians are all, by the way, also arrogant by necessity. So because on some level you have to believe that you're good enough to play with everybody in the room around you. So there's a level of arrogance that comes with the territory that you also have to keep in check. But the conductor basically forces a uniform decision on the ensemble. But once everybody knows what that decision is, especially at high levels, it's not a problem. Like, you walk in understanding that they're like where the issues might be, but like, and at high levels they don't like. At high levels, if you don't play all of the music in tune at the right time, you're not there, or you're leaving after you get there. Like,
Yeah, it's
Mm.
what do they call
you
it?
got to prove
That's
yourself.
the sound of unemployment. That's what it is. But yeah,
You know,
anyways.
you play that triplet like a set of 3/8 notes. You're out.
Yeah, no,
Sorry.
absolutely. If that happened, are you kidding me? No, there's no way anybody would let you stick around in an ensemble after something like, you might get away with it like once.
I don't know if you viewers at home could tell, but Andy is a musician. I don't know if you could tell by the variety of instruments in the background.
They're everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was supposed to be a commentary on how group projects function differently, both at high levels and in music, than everywhere else. So
Yeah. Well, I think
It's
music
very
education
dependent.
it's unique because I think arts in general, art education in terms of music, visual arts, digital arts, even like choreography, dancing, all that kind of stuff. I feel like the rules of standard education don't apply in those scenarios, and
they do
convert
actually.
well
There's
in
a set of New York State standards for music education.
well I mean like the standards. I guess standards is the wrong word. I mean the process of advancement in those areas, like you were saying, like music is so unique in that aspect where it's group work, but it's basically everyone does their homework and can come together even if they don't like never worked together before. And I think that has come to something that I wanted to ask earlier was do you think because Jason and I went to a technical school, so we went and basically learned a vocation. Do you think that vocational schools can do you think vocational schools have the same value that you would get from a school that does teach classes involving like the arts and music and that kind of thing?
So I think to start that there's a couple of questions wrapped up into that one question. Um, and I think the first question is there, what is the value differential between a technical school and a general education?
There is definitely a benefit to technical, but that really depends
Well,
on.
but that's the question, right? That's the first part of the question.
Yeah, basically, it's
Okay.
do you, and I guess value is a very loose term, and
Yeah.
so you can define it however you'd like. But yeah, so what do you think that a technical an education in a technical field and in a technical school can provide the same value as a standard education or even an education based around the arts?
Yes and no. And you're going to like my response, actually, because you use the words the same, which means equal in math, and they're not equal. They are different. And I think it depends on what values you have. So and this is also, I think that there should be more freedom to be able to select what your education is going to be like, because there are definitely people who would do much better in a technical school or a trade school than a general education. And there are people who do better in general education than the other two. And it depends on what you like to do, what you want to do, and what you want your future to be like.
Well, actually, no, it depends on luck because ours was a lottery to get in.
Yeah, and that is
It's
that true.
disgusting
Yeah,
that you have to go through a lottery process in order to go to a school where you can learn a trade or in that fashion or some. It's something that you can use for the rest of your life skill wise, and you can turn that into a career if you need to.
Yeah,
You
like
guys
Or
keep
if-
saying
or
that you went to a
even-
technical school. I'm not totally clear on exactly what that means, actually.
Well,
I guess
so-
I should preface all my responses with that.
so for us, a technical school combines a trade education and I guess standard K-12 education at the same time. So
Oh.
instead of providing classes like drawing and I don't know, computer like computer science, you
We
can
still provided those.
well
though.
well in the trades themselves though. Like if you wanted to learn computer science, you would go to the electronics trade and you would learn I don't know, circuiting. Jason was in the trade, so I
Yeah,
don't.
they teach you how to, like, somewhat the basics of building circuits, logic gates, stuff like that.
Designing software, all that, and then you get. For me, I was in a journalism based trade for media broadcasting, where we learned how to shoot, edit, and edit videos, make commercials, advertisements, and different things, as well as operate in a newsroom in terms of directing, anchoring, and that kind of thing. At the same time, there's trades anything from health fields, dentistry, carpentry. Uh, we had an HVAC trade area. We have a digital arts trade area. But basically, your freshman year, you decide which trade you want to do, and you're stuck with that trade for the span of the 4 years. And in place of having these small extracurriculars that you get to, or not extracurriculars, small electives, you have this big trade, and you have less room for electives, but you can still have few, and your choices are a lot thinner.
That's really interesting. That system is I actually kind of like that system. I feel like that would have probably worked out well for me. I think it really does, like, I think it does boil down to the fact that you should have a broader ability to choose the nature of your education, because we're in, like, standardization is standardization is a good thing and a bad thing.
Oh,
Like,
I
it's
agree.
like-
I
like,
think
it's
I think
a-
I know where you're going with this, but you can
like,
continue.
you have it is a good idea to set a universal standard to be like, okay, you're this age, you should be here. The fact that we use it as the end all be all of your education is monstrously bad, in my opinion, because it, especially from an educator's perspective, and this is actually my older brother is a math teacher, so he has this problem a lot. He teaches in, like, inner city somewhere in Ohio, and he teaches middle school math, and he's supposed to magically get kids who don't understand, like, addition and subtraction to pass, like, the middle school regents exams that are operating at levels that the kids don't even have a prayer of touching. So his passing rate is some ludicrously low percentage. Like, he talks about, I'm going to mess up the numbers, but he's like, it's like somewhere hovering around like 30% or something wild. It might not be that low.
Jeez.
I
But
mean,
here's
that
the
sounds
thing.
like it
That's
could be true.
considered good. Like, the percentage is ludicrously low, and he does better than average. Like, so that's the problem. Like, you can have these standards, like, you should be here, here, and here, but the like, applying it across the spectrum, nobody sits there and asks the question, but what if you're not? What if you have 70% of your kids who are not?
Oh yeah, and then teachers themselves get stuck in this hole where it's like, well, all of my students aren't understanding what I'm teaching, but we're running short on time before the exam, so we have to
Yeah.
pump everything out.
And then you teach to the test, and then
Yeah.
you're sunk.
And I mean,
Like-
and I agree. Teaching to the test is the worst possible thing you can do, especially for your students. And I think that it screws them over because all you're doing is trying to keep your job, but I mean, you're not doing your job correctly by teaching to the test and by teaching students something they couldn't even begin to comprehend. Like I could start lecturing you guys about math subspaces and grouping and what makes a set and a subset. But and you guys might understand to an extent, but even it, you guys wouldn't be able to listen to what I'm teaching you and then immediately take a test on it and do well on the test. Like that's not how that works.
Well, that's not how learning works.
If you guys don't have if you don't have the background on that, then there's no way you could successfully perform. And I think that's the issue that teachers get stuck in so much nowadays. And like you said, your brother, John, he gets stuck in this loop where it's, well, they weren't prepared when they came to me, and now I have to try and prepare them for the next level. But I mean, I'm not going to be able to do that, and so I'm going to send unprepared people to the next grade, and so on and so forth. And it's a problem where it's just pushing students further and further back. You know?
I think one thing that definitely causes issues, you guys can let me know if I'm wrong in this, but wouldn't it make sense that having homework be part of the like teaching curriculum? Couldn't that be detrimental? Because if someone can't complete their homework due to external factors, that should not mean they don't learn what they are supposed to learn.
Well, yeah. So, and I'd like to cover this because I've actually been learning about this recently. First off, there's no proof that homework actually works. Even practice problems, there's no proof that students going home and doing their homework improves their test scores. And I guess test scores are the only really way you can measure performance, which is sad, but that's a different thing. But yeah, I agree. Making part of the curriculum be taught through homework is it's detrimental to the education system, because sometimes the reason students don't do homework is due to these external factors. Maybe they don't have a home to do it. Maybe they don't have a desk. Maybe when they go home, they don't understand it, and they ask their parents, and their parents don't understand it either. Maybe they go home and all they want to do is sleep because they were up all night with their parents arguing. Like there's all these external factors that you have to account for when you assign homework, because you have to take into account that it might not get done, and you have to just let it go. Like you can't enforce a student to do homework when they have things going on. And that goes back, we always I feel like we mentioned this a lot, the hierarchy of needs.
I was about to bring it up. I was about to be like, this sounds like a great time to plug Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah, when their lower needs aren't met, they can't worry about the upper ones, you know? So.
Well, when you're thinking about it in that way, I guess here's maybe a question for Eli, I guess for both of you.
Technically, we're both teachers. So.
You are both teachers, but I guess, Eli, since you're teaching a STEM subject, that it would more apply to you. Is the goal of teaching math just wrong inherently? Like, here, I'll get to what I'm trying to say is,
this is a broader question, I think, than just stem cell. I think I'm going to try and take a stab at what I think you're trying to ask. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think you're trying to ask, what do you think the current responsibility of the school system is, and what do you think it should be?
Exactly. Yes. I'm gonna say what I think it should be really briefly. It's that at using math as an example, students that take math throughout school should be able to understand problems in the real world that math can solve. They shouldn't necessarily need to know how to solve them, but they should know how they could solve them.
So for me, in terms of math specifically, I think it's less about the content and more about the problem solving. So it's preparing students with the set of tools that they need to approach a problem level-headed and be able to come up with a logical solution to the problem, as well as being able to look at a problem someone else is having, or look at a solution that someone has created for a problem and understand why it doesn't work. And I think that's the deep down goal for me in terms of teaching mathematics. And I think you can teach that through numbers, and the numbers surely help improve the logical portion of that. But it's also being able to comprehend, and this has to do with content literacy, which is a little bit different. It's being able to understand stuff particular to the content area. And so for math, it's being able to understand like rules like multiplication, addition, uh, and like order of operations. It's being able to understand these rules. But for me, it's about the broader goal of problem solving. And I think that depending on who you ask is kind of being reached, but it's kind of ironic because there's so many problems inherent in what's going on right now with the education system that it's hard to solve, and it's not working out right. And I think that my goal is when I start teaching to try my best to accommodate for that, but it's gonna take an army.
Think about stuff that people could actually learn from math. Like, for example, if you're driving through a yellow light, normally you go through yellow lights pretty often, I assume, for most people.
I used to
But
not. I used to not go through
Yeah.
yellow lights at all when I started driving because I was like,
Well,
oh, it means start to stop.
Yes, well, you should behave that way when you're learning driving, but if you feel comfortable enough to drive through the yellow light, then sure. But if you drive through the yellow light and it goes red instantly, and you saw it turn yellow, and you saw that it turned red way too fast for the size of the intersection or size of the road, having that intuition kind of in a way comes from learning math and physics in school, and sort of seeing that this is wrong. This does not give enough time for safety, because a lot of the issues that the school teaches you can be applied to make things safer.
I think that I'm going to loop back a little bit. I think that the role of education should be to generate independent, functional thinkers. And music, in that sense, I also think that music specifically does a good job of teaching self-responsibility, because it requires you to practice on your own time to do it well. So you have to, and I'm really particular about this with all my private students, that they all keep a log of the amount of time they've practiced on each day. And then the first thing that happens when they show up into one of my lessons is I go, show me your practice log. And then we talk about what happened here, what happened here. I have this one quite excellent student, and she handed me a practice log once, and it was almost empty. And what we actually did that lesson, I sat down and I said, it was a remarkable level of awareness on her part. I was very impressed.
Show me how you practice. I feel like that's where this is going.
It's actually not, because it goes deeper. I said, did you not have time, or did you manage your time poorly? And she sat there on the piano bench for like 5 seconds, 5 to 10 seconds, and she said, I don't think I managed my time very well. And that level of self-awareness from like a middle schooler was like, all right.
Middle school.
Yeah. I was like, all right, yeah, good. So then we spent some time talking about how to organize time, how to structure time, and why time is valuable. So, these are really important things that are difficult to teach, and I don't think they get touched on particularly in other subjects as much. So I think that's one of the reasons why music is like essential for schools, because It teaches things that do not lend themselves to the other subjects in the same regard.
And I feel like every subject in their own way does that. They have something particular about them that makes them unique, and I think that's the reason why we have separated subjects. But I think that's something we could touch on a little bit after our break. But for now, we'll go on break, and then we'll come back and discuss some more. I think we're getting a lot out of this, so I'm curious to see where it goes. Welcome back. Thanks for sticking with us after the break, and we're just gonna dive right into it. I have a two-part question that I wanted to ask you guys, and one of it kind of connects back to something we discussed earlier. One, where do you think that the public education system or high school in general, where do you think that they failed you personally? And two, is there anything you would change or add to your high school experience? It could be a class, it can be anything that you think you could add to make that experience more beneficial, but also more pleasant.
Well, apart from group project work, which high school definitely failed me in, I would say being like not being an employee. Like for me, right, I've been spending so much time trying to figure out the path for me where I don't end up being someone else's employee. I'm perfectly fine being a partner of of a firm or something like that, but being an employee in this context, I think.
So would you say that they basically didn't prepare you to be a leader? They more prepared you to be a sheep and a follower than anything else?
Oh, for sure. And in a way, current school I'm going to kind of does that, but it like the school itself does, but not a lot of the professors. A lot of the professors highly encourage you to think outside the box and figure out things that wouldn't even be expected of you to figure out in a typical employee role. So yeah, learning leadership skills as well as difficult system, like management of difficult systems. Like if you're running a business that has as many variables as architecture does, that's definitely a skill you want to be learning for as long as you possibly can. That's why the older architects are generally more well established, because they've gotten that time. And it's not necessarily the time being in the field, or in the field that is actually producing projects, that leads to that. I think it definitely has more to do with new collaboration skills gained, developing ideas over that time period, and just learning how to manage the system that you're operating well enough so that you're not just spending all of your time on managing that. Goes back to Andy's time management. If you can if you can do a skill like budgeting quicker, you have a lot more time to think about the actual core parts of the project, which are how are these people going to move throughout the space, who are they, what do they need, and how can this space make their days and lives better.
And yeah, I'm curious to see where you land on this too, because I think that you had a different experience than we did.
What's the I remember the first part of the question was, where did high school fail you? What was the second part?
The second part is basically, where would you correct it? What would you add? What could you add to better improve either your outlook on it or better improve the experience you had?
Oh yeah, I will add one more thing after Andy.
This is an interesting question.
We're diving a little deep.
I think
Sorry.
that I refuse to believe that high school failed me.
Well, I mean, and like and I can agree with that in a way. I think there's areas where high school failed me, but I wouldn't say in general that it failed me overall.
I think that high school is a system created by humans and is therefore inevitably flawed. And to assign failure to that system destroys. No, that's not right. To assign failure to that system absolves you of the responsibility of taking control of your life.
I feel like that
Well, yeah,
I
but
feel like
that's blaming it though
yeah,
on.
I think you can acknowledge where it's failed you in a way, but still accept blame for like accepting blame for how it's impacted you.
I mean, there are areas where it was certainly less functional and areas where it was more functional. But I think to consider it a failure on the part of the institution is not a healthy concept. I think it assigns too much responsibility to the institution and not enough personal responsibility.
I
Well,
I guess I could see
yes,
that,
but
but
in that case though, wouldn't it put the reliance on developing personal responsibility on your parents? Like if
Yes.
you should put that, you can't rely on parents to give that. I don't think I don't think every parent has the ability to do that. A lot, almost all of them do, and most of them pass that on to their children. But there are a lot of children that are left behind, and school is a potential place that can help them learn these skills. And I guess a failure, having a failed high school experience, I would say is very rare, and and can be defined by your time spent at high school was a net negative. And I don't think that's the case for most people. Like for me, it was definitely a net positive, and I think it was the same for you too.
yeah, I agree. I agree that high school is a net positive for me, but I think that it is okay to acknowledge the flaws in something and without it affecting your personal responsibility. Like earlier, I mentioned how high school failed me in preparing me to work collaboratively in groups. I part of that is my fault. Like I don't go out of my way to learn how to work with other people, and instead I try to divide the work rather than communicate and conquer over the work, and I can accept personal responsibility for that. But I think that school could have or not the school in general, but teachers that I've had could have better prepared me to work in effective groups.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
I think
did.
part of it is that I guess I dislike the verbiage used. Like the reasoning is actually, I think it's valuable to point out flaws within a system, especially one that's universally applied. I think it's actually necessary to be able to do that. But I dislike the idea of considering it a failure and assigning theoretical responsibility, because even if that's not your intention, the way you talk about it implies that the blame rests solely with the institution.
I would say I see how it places blame, but I don't see how it places blame solely on the institution. I would agree that it does provide an outlet or it does direct the blame or partially to the organization, but I don't think, at least from the way that I see it, I don't see how it places all the blame on that.
No, you're right. That was poor word choice on my part. But I think the verbiage assigns a disproportionate amount of blame.
But yeah, I agree with you in the fact that like you can't expect schools to be perfect. I love the point that you made where you said that schools are man-made and so they're bound to be flawed. I think that's an important thing to recognize because it's nothing man-made is going to be perfect, and I think that even the Titanic was sinkable. So I think public schools should be looked at the same way, where they're bound to have flaws, but it's the fact that it's lasted this long is pretty remarkable, and if we can continue to improve upon it, because even when it starts to sink, we can patch the hole and pour out the water. Get
The
some
best
bucket.
thing for a system or institution is to figure out what the goal of it is and then build into that system or institution self-correcting measures that realign it to the goal if it sways.
Well,
Like
I think the issue of determining one set of goals for a school is that you're not going to please everybody, and I think that's the issue with schools now is that we've set so hard on standardized testing that it's like school is so focused on content that you can throw everything else out the window. Like you can throw away the funding for arts programs, you can throw away the funding for developing, or not the funding, you can throw out the time spent at developing independent thinkers. You can throw out the time developing to help people or students develop their own character and personality. You can throw all these things out the window because you're so focused on content. And I think that's the issue. You would have a similar issue if you try and set a single goal in a school instead of a broad set of goals that that can be molded. And I think Andy mentioned something earlier about uh, providing options for schools, which I don't completely disagree with. I think public, as long as they're like public options, that's fine. I even disagree with the fact that the school Jason and I went to was a lottery process, because I think that that was a really great opportunity for me as a student, and I would love for everyone to have that opportunity. I'm actually my little brother he will be going to high school next year, and he has the opportunity to apply for the lottery for the school that I went to, but there's no saying he'll get in, and I'm gonna be upset if he doesn't get to go to where I went, but I don't think he wants to go there anyways. So
wasn't it the case for you, Eli, that because your older brother went there that you got in, no
yeah.
questions asked?
Yeah, so the school we went to also had a legacy program. So if you have a family member, an immediate family member who went there, you could go there and get in.
It's
So
it's not a very democratic or fair system.
yep. And then if you did like extracurriculars, like band and stuff, you're more likely to get in than if you are just like an academic nut or whatever.
Yeah, I was the last person to get in. Literally the last person on that bout. I got in August because someone else dropped.
But yeah,
And
I think that having a choice of school that is focused on, I guess, like having a variety of schools that each have a different goal, and having the option of which school you go to would be most beneficial. But it it would require a lot of internal changes to the way that schooling works.
do you
This
think
question was a
school?
lot heavier than I thought it was going to be. We went a
Yeah.
lot deeper than I thought this was going to
I
go.
told you I'm digging deep. I really am. I'm digging deep.
uh,
Is the whole idea of having school districts flawed in general? Like instead of having all schools function under the state, or
I
at
think
the very
school.
least under the county, because
It depends.
districts really create these divisions.
Well, it depends. It depends what you're looking for. If you're looking for uniform education, this falls in the same thing as Common Core and standardized testing. If you're looking for uniformity, then having multiple districts is a bad idea. But if you're looking for um, finding the best education for you, then having districts, I think, is more like options equal more personalized. Uh, I guess in this case, education equal more personalized education.
Yeah, like for say for example, you have a county and the county has a certain number of schools. maybe doing it by county is the best way, where you have you have that county, and then all the buses serve all of the county, and then you just pick the school, and each school is like a different set of trades, a different set of way of, so you can determine sort of what you want a possible path to be early on, and you can always switch.
I think the issue with having districts, having like fewer larger districts, is that it's very hard to communicate when you get to larger scale, especially in areas that are spread out. Like take Sussex County, for example. We have how many different school districts? Like 8 or 9
8,
different school districts
9, I
in our
believe.
one county. If you were to take all of those school districts and combine it into one, there's no way that that a education designed for students in Seaford, a what is considered an inner city school in our rural county, to something like Indian River, which is a more rural type school.
But
Let
when you
me
think of,
propose my alternate insight, brilliant flash of inspiration concept that just popped into my head.
Go for it.
yes,
We already have a really standardized system of schooling, right? And we have the infrastructure behind it is designed to get all the kids in X area to X school. And that, like, busing is actually, you know, its own complicated issue
Correct.
that revolves around this as well. What if we had it? What if we tried to consolidate both worlds, where just when you reach, I think high school is really where everything starts to, where like your potential career paths start to appear and branch out. What if you had the option in any school of being in an accelerated program for that specific profession?
So make every school like a trade school.
Just incorporate that concept as an option into every school.
definitely an option. So if someone chooses that they don't yet know, they don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
But the issue with doing that has to circle back to funding. Is education is already poorly funded as it is.
I was gonna
Providing or making schools provide these options, making every school provide these options, would be very hard to provide a good education as well as proper equipment for different fields that are like necessary. So there is, I understand what you're going for, and I completely agree that it's a great idea, but I think there's issues behind funding that need to be solved before that's a viable path.
Oh yeah, no,
There-
absolutely.
there's
the funding
one-
behind public schools is like a disaster and a half.
That's
So-
that's what the issue. That's the main issue I have with districts. Like for example, the school district that I would have gone to if I did not go to the technical school is the wealthiest school district within the county, and that school is substantially better than the county school that I went to, the trade school. And so I mean, I made an active decision to choose the school that had poorer funding due to the teachers there and the ability to take a technical course. But if all those schools were lumped under one district, the funding would not be like, oh, this is a rich neighborhood, they get a better funded school. No, the funding is across the board.
And
What
I
do you
think
guys think?
that's partly due to school funding being based on property taxes, because property
Yeah.
taxes in the beach areas are a lot higher than they are over here
Well,
in the more rural areas.
let me
So-
throw my initial thought of a problem at that one is that the people who are working at the school, their standard of living is got to be close to, well, not their standard, their what they would need to live in the area to be close enough to the school to work at it is affected by how difficult it is economically to live in the area. So
Yeah.
I think that's a difficult problem that would have to be solved if you were going
Yeah.
to do something like that. Because in theory, the quality and the resources being evenly distributed would be good. But it means that working somewhere with a lower socioeconomic need would be like far preferable to working anywhere with a higher standard of living or a higher income cost of living. That's the phrase I'm looking for.
Yeah, but say you were a teacher that lived in the beach areas where that school that I would go to was, yeah, you would have that choice if you choose to work at that district. or at that school, then you would have a much better location than your counterparts. You just wouldn't have as much, like, comparably to those that you live around, you wouldn't have as much wealth. And so you have that choice of being, I'm gonna prioritize location over, like, amenities, or amenities over location. And then that becomes a personal living decision. Because I mean, I've lived in areas where it's like the location made this worth it, no matter how shitty the place was, or the how shitty the living conditions were. The location made it worth it. My example was living in London, absolute shitbox, but location on point. Go downstairs, walk a couple stores down, same block, excellent handmade pizza place, really cheap. Love that.
The specifics of London getting thrown in here, but I think that has, in part, I think Andy was talking about. I don't know if you mentioned teacher pay. I don't know.
That was basically what I was
Yeah.
looping towards.
Is I think part of that is rooted in teachers should get paid more in general.
Yes.
Across the
Absolutely,
board.
yes.
It's a hard job, and it's yeah. I don't think I've met a person who was like, no, teachers get paid enough. No,
Yeah.
I think every time I tell people I want to be a teacher, the first response I get is, why? You're not going to make that much money. And I think that's the flaw. I remember telling my stepmother that I wanted to be a teacher, and her response was, "Oh, but you're so smart." Like smart, like you don't want smart people to be a teacher, you know? It's and it was just like, what? Huh? Do you not
Did you
want
guys
smart
know
people to teach your
that
kids?
lotteries were supposed to fund schools?
Yes.
Wait, what?
Yes,
the
state
lottery
lotteries
system.
were
State
intended.
lotteries were supposed to fund schools.
How?
So what was supposed to happen is that you were supposed to buy a lottery ticket, and the money they made off of the lottery tickets was supposed to go to the school systems. By the way, it doesn't.
It was that would work nicely.
That would
Could you
be a nice
imagine?
boost to the school systems. That would be if everything functioned as was intended.
How would pots be determined then at that point?
I have no idea. Well,
You would
I don't
still have
know, and
pots.
two, I don't. And two, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, but I mean, yeah.
uh,
Well, there could be more exclusive funding within government, whereas like this source directly will fund this source. But
well,
there's also
funding of-
issues with that.
I think there's the funding of the schools is like this disastrous problem that should be solved because there's the most important thing you can do for a society is try to get everybody to start in roughly the same spot. And so it's really important to have a public school system, and getting it funded properly is an important part of that. And they're not. And so that's actually, I think that's where a big part of the problem is like we have this system that's supposed to be a public system that's drastically underfunded, that's supposed to be the thing that equalizes everybody as much as possible so that the opportunities they could pursue they would be able to pursue whichever opportunity they chose.
Yeah, the goal of public school should be to minimize the benefit of generational wealth as much as possible. Like, your school should be there to minimize the amount that parents having money matters.
I like to think about that from the other direction. I like to think about it as maximizing the potential of people who have less. Because
Oh yeah, but you want to bring them all as close as possible, and bring them up as much as
I think
bring everyone
maximize-
up and as close as possible.
I think maximizing everyone's potential would be ideal,
yeah.
but
Yes.
but I see what you're getting at with maximizing to be
I'm
not as well off.
I'm looking at it from a more like an equity perspective rather than an equality perspective.
I think that's the way to look at it too. Is I think equity is a lot more effective than an equality view. I think that's gonna do it for us today.
Yeah.
Jason's
Long.
got to get working on architecture stuff.
Yes, I'm making a giant 19,000 resident site. Amazing.
Are you actually making it, or is it a school project?
It's a school project, but it's cool because the architect that's doing is actually doing the real site, and we are going to converse with that community in Los Angeles.
Ooh,
So
interesting.
and it's also cool because like us as students will be solving problems with the site, like the elevations on certain areas cause issues. These are some issues that happen with the site, and it's so fun watching the professor watch us figure out stuff that he's figured out for the site already. He's like, they're doing it. They're doing it.
I and real quick, I wanted to mention this because that touches on something that I've been thinking about a lot recently. Is I've gotten to the point of my schooling where I look at teachers teach something, and I'm like, I know exactly where they're going with this, and then they do exactly what I thought they were gonna do, and I'm like, yep.
Oh,
And then the students say exactly what they predicted them to do, and you can tell because it's in their slideshow the mistake that the students made. Already, it's in the teacher's slideshow, and they're like, "Okay, why wouldn't you do it like this? This makes perfect sense."
Yeah, it was like for the most recent one was our teacher threw us a curveball. He lied to us about like a height on the site. He said it sloped one way when it did not slope that way. And everyone else in the class went along with it, except for me and my partner. We were doing a little extra research, and we're like, wait a second, that thing he said earlier, that's wrong. It doesn't do that. And then we came into class, told him that, showed him why he's wrong, and he's like, "Yep, I was aware. I was aware it did that. I did this for simplicity. The fact that you realize that is impressive."
The moment I do love teaching, and I do want to touch on the aha moments, I guess. You know what, with Eli, you probably have some perspective on this. When you're teaching and you can see it when somebody gets something.
Oh yeah,
And
best
like
feeling in the world.
Absolutely. Like whenever you talk about that with other people who teach, they all kind of go.
They're like, I know
You get
exactly
that. You get that. And
I
then
know
the other
exactly
one is,
what you're thinking.
I don't know if you've done this. This happens to me a lot. I get, what do I like? This happens particularly when I do private lessons because I have a little more freedom to kind of be a little more free-minded, I guess is the right word. I'll get really agitated when I'm teaching, and I'll actually start walking around the room. So like I'll have a student at the piano, and I'll just start walking around the room, like tapping my head, like thinking. And it's just, I don't know, like there's a feel, like I get into a mode where I'm just like, yes, this, do this, like
It's
kind of like a psycho.
It's like where you have, I don't know if this is what you're thinking of. It's like when you have a plan and it's like not going the way you want it to, and then you're just like, what if I did this instead? And then you do that, and then the student just like starts doing it right, and you're just like, yes, that's exactly what I wanted. Okay, perfect.
You shift on the fly, and it works. The shift works, and you're like, yes.
But
Right.
that's gonna do it for us today. We'll catch you guys next week when we're talking about We Don't Know Yet, and
We'll figure it out.
we'll figure it out, and we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for watching. Like and
Have a good day.
subscribe. Also, do that. All right.
Have a good day, everyone.
Peace.